Hi friends, my name is Deborah. I am an alcoholic. Can everybody hear me all right? I'll use my teacher voice. I do have experience with these steps as they're laid out in the Big Book with 2 Big Book step study sponsors and meetings just like this. Wow, I'm nervous, sorry. I have made a lot of amends. I still have a couple to make, and I practice the rest of the steps to the best of my willingness daily. Thank you, Bonnie, for asking me to speak. So just briefly, I started drinking and using at a very young age. I was 13, and it was nonstop till I was 39, and then a loving higher power that I didn't believe in or know about plunked my butt probably right in that front row there, and so began my journey. But I had been sober and attending meetings for maybe 14 or 15 years prior to that, and had worked the steps in a different way. And I was sober, and I was going to meetings and doing all the right things, but there was something missing inside. And I didn't know what it was, and I was starting to feel, restless, irritable, and discontent in sobriety, and I couldn't understand why. And I just kept feeling like there's got to be something more, and my wise sponsor at the time, she said, you need to come to this meeting. And thus began my journey in Big Book Step Study, and I'll be forever grateful because it really changed my life. It changed my sobriety for sure, but it changed my life. That's all I'm going to give for a drunkalogue, and it wasn't really one at all. So, step 6, right up front, it says if we can answer to our satisfaction. Well, answer what? So I always go back to the page before and read, that last paragraph where it talks about, doing your 5th step and finishing up your 5th step, and, there's asking, have we done the best job that we can, right? Have we read the first 5 proposals, which are the steps, which my sponsor had me do? Have I omitted anything? It says, because, we're building an arch through which we shall walk free, okay? Is my work solid? And I really, really had worked really hard on, my 4th step and my 5th step, when I did it with my sponsor. Were the stones properly in place? Did I skimp on the cement to put into the foundation? And have I tried to make mortar without sand? And I can honestly say that, I really worked hard, and I did the complete best that I could do in my work. And so I said, I could answer to my satisfaction, right? And by then, having learned a lot about myself, I was really willing to have these defects removed. I was so sick of reading them to my sponsor, like the same things over and over and over. And I wouldn't have gotten to that knowledge without having done a 4th and 5th step, So I really, I was so sick of myself, right? So, I have some notes here that I'm going to refer to. So, was I ready to have God remove from me all the things which I admitted were objectionable? Absolutely. Because, along with that was a little bit of guilt and shame and remorse. But, I can honestly say that having been aware of those things finally. I wasn't beating myself up, which was my MO previously. Like, just, I was really hard on myself. Was I ready for my higher power to take them all, everyone? Yes, I was. Was I still clinging to something that I wouldn't let go? And if I was, I would have to ask God to be willing. And, there are still things that even come up today that I can see that I'm holding on to, like, oh, okay. But in all honesty, everything stems from fear, no matter what it is. If I keep working at it and getting down to, whatever it is, it's usually fear. So, so step 6 is, each step has a principle. And so the step 6 principle is willingness. And I really believe that having worked the previous steps really showed a willingness on my part, right? Because it wasn't fun writing all this stuff and crying about it and whatever, but I was willing because, 15 years sober, I was kind of miserable and I didn't want to feel that way. I kept looking for that, where's that happy, joyous, free that people keep talking about in sobriety? I wanted that. And I saw it in all of your faces, right? So, and that willingness up until this point wasn't previously available to me, right? I kind of was always holding back a little bit. And again, I think it was fear. And so I was ready. And so I did what my sponsor told me to do, and what the book tells us to do is, after I shared the last of my 5th step with my sponsors, I went home and she told me to read 6 and 7 out of the 12 and 12, which I brought. And if you don't have one of these, I suggest you get one. This is how I got sober, through the 12 and 12, which I don't recommend because it's like doing the program backwards, but that's all right. So I read 6 and 7, and then I sat for an hour in meditation and kind of just, and I can honestly say that I don't know that I ever felt that calm. I had a meditation like I've never had in my life before, So, and then, when we were ready, we say something like this, my Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. And, in just these 2 very short paragraphs, they've got the word now like 5 times. And now is every moment for me, right? And that's how I have to do this, and this is how I have to live my program, every moment, right? Because, early on I heard that I can't stay clean on yesterday's shower. So, I have to do today or now whatever I need to do to have quality sobriety. And step 7 is humility, the principle. And, the dictionary is probably my 3rd favorite book in all of creation. So I looked up the definition of humility this morning, and it says, having or showing consciousness of one's shortcomings. Imagine that. And then it says, to lower in pride. All right, so that's humility. So, and for me, step 7 harkens back to step 3, that whole getting rid of self, right? All that self stuff, self-seeking, self-justification, self-righteous anger, procrastination, again, fear, you know, and in step 6 and 7, we have to, excuse me, we have to make a new venture, and I think it says it in the 12 and 12, a new venture into open-mindedness. Because my problem is I think I know anything, everything, right? Thinking I know, right? What's good for you, what's good for me, what's good for whatever, what you should do, what should happen, you know. And that gets me, what does that get me? That gets me pain. That gets me resentment. That gets me anger. That gets me, you know, it's yuck, right? And I have a disease of want, right? You can fill in anything after that, right? You know, of want. I want, I need, I gotta have. I want this, I want you to do this, I want you to say that, I want the world to be a certain way. And so wrapped up in that want causes me pain, anxiety, sadness, disappointment, you know, so getting rid of, and what is that? I have to get rid of my ego. You know, it's that, what does it say, lowering of pride, right? I have to get rid of that because I don't know, you know, and I have to keep relying and going to this power greater than myself that I was understanding through doing this work, right? Understanding through doing this work. Because when I started, it was like, yeah, I don't know, right? But, you know, by doing the work and really being willing, I'd started to develop this relationship with a power greater than myself that I could kind of trust and rely on. Because for me, doing this work was a little bit scary, right? I didn't want to take this deep dive into me, you know, because I still had that guilt and shame and remorse. But, you know, this higher power that I have to tell you, I never put a word on paper without going to my higher power first. I have to, because I have to get out of here and get here, right? You know, I have to go from head to heart, because what happens up here is quite often not accurate. Right? Because I love to tell stories to myself, because that's when I'm comfortable, right? I'm comfortable telling myself these little fabrications, because it's what I want. So, you know, and this is all about, all right, so I'm giving all of this to my higher power, you know, please take it, just please take it. And I have to trust that I will be relieved of my defects of character, because going back to the earlier steps, when I was begging my higher power to be relieved of that obsession and compulsion for alcohol and drugs and cigarettes and all that other stuff, I was relieved of the obsession and compulsion and desire. That's a flippin' miracle, if you ask me, because I had used without stopping for 27 years. How else is that going to happen? I couldn't do it. All the power that I possessed, I couldn't do it. But when I got here and truly asked a power greater than myself that I didn't even know or feel or have a relationship with, but I was doing it because the old-timers were telling me, get on your knees and ask. And they didn't even really care. Ask whatever, you know, something greater than you. And I felt like such a lowlife when I got here that pretty much everything was greater than me. So it wasn't a stretch. And I was relieved. So I have to believe that that's proof that if I'm truly asking a power greater than myself to relieve myself of all these character defects, it'll happen. It'll happen, you know? And, you know, all I have to do is be willing. You know, I have to unclench my fists and be open. So, you know, and in the 12 and 12, it says, for humility, which is step 7, the basic ingredient of all humility is a desire to seek and do God's will. That's not that hard, you know, if I'm truly honest about it. You know, I can't just pay lip service to this higher power and go skipping along pretending. That's not going to work for me. And it certainly doesn't work for the people around me. So, you know, it's about, you know, this willingness and this humility, it's about character building, right? And spiritual values, you know, and I think that's in the 12 and 12. You know, character building and spiritual values. I want that, because I hadn't been that ever. And you know, I want to go through whatever's left of my life, you know, being a stand-up person, right? I don't want to go through life hurting people anymore. I don't want to go through life being judgmental. I don't want to go through life being fearful and angry and, you name it. And whenever I'm wondering how I am, you know, I go through those 9 questions that are in the big book when we're doing, you know, when we're writing our turnarounds in step 4, you know. Where am I selfish? Where am I, you know, resentful? Where am I, you know, fearful? Where am I, you know, it's just like, oh, God, okay. And those things that are in my character that don't want to really be revealed start popping up. Like, okay, you again, right? But I know what to do with it today, right? You know, where does this come from? So, you know, I'm so grateful. You know, there's 6 and 7 in the big book is so small. But there's so much to it, and for me, they're almost, I can't say my favorite steps, but they're so important to me in my life. They're so important to me in my life, and it gives me that pause. Whenever I'm starting to get a little antsy or squirrely or, you know, wrapped around the axle, I'm like, okay, what is this, you know? And then I can start to do the little bit of work and go, all right, I get it. You know, and truly for this alcoholic, and I've said it a couple of times, but it's always fear for me. Because when I was writing out my fears in my 4th step, there was so much to that part, you know, just afraid of other people's opinions, afraid of not being good enough, afraid of not being whatever enough. You know, afraid that I'm going to make a mistake, afraid that people aren't going to like me, afraid, you know, yikes. Talk about the bondage of self, right? Ugh. So I hope I've said something today that could just resonate with somebody, but that's my take on 6 and 7. Thank you.